This happened about 3 years ago when I was living alone in a rental house outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was a one-story place, nothing fancy, but it backed up to a wooded area that made the backyard feel pretty private. I didn't know many of my neighbors. Most people on the street were older or kept to themselves, which I didn't mind. I worked from home, so I didn't exactly go out of my way to meet anyone either. There was one guy, though, who stood out. He lived 2 houses down, on the same side of the street as me. Early 60s, tall gray beard, always wore this dark green windbreaker and jeans no matter what the weather was. I'd see him outside a lot, just standing at the end of his driveway or sitting on a folding chair under his carport. Never really doing anything, just watching. He never waved, never smiled, just stared. The first time something felt off was one evening around 9:30. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, and I got this weird feeling like I was being watched. I turned and looked out the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. It was dark, but my porch light was on, and I swear for half a second, I saw someone standing just at the edge of the woods. When I flipped the light on and stepped closer, there was nothing. I told myself it was just a shadow, or maybe my eyes playing tricks. But something about the shape I thought I saw stuck with me. It didn't look like an animal or tree. It looked like a person standing still. A few days later, I was working late on my laptop in the living room when I heard footsteps outside, on the side of the house. They were slow and crunching on the gravel path that led around to the backyard. I muted my TV and stood up. There were no windows on that side, so I moved to the back of the house and looked out the kitchen window. Nothing. Then I moved to the sliding door and looked out. Still nothing. I stood there for a while, just watching. Then I saw it. A man, tall, wearing a windbreaker, was walking slowly from the side of my house toward the woods behind the fence. His back was to me. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't need to. I knew it was the neighbor. I opened the sliding door and called out, "Hey!" He didn't turn, just kept walking. I watched him disappear into the trees. The next day, I walked over to his house. I didn't even know his name, but I figured I should say something. When I knocked on the door, no one answered, but I could hear a TV playing inside, some old movie or news channel. I knocked again, louder. Nothing. Then I heard the front door of the house next door open. It was a woman, maybe in her 50s. She asked if I needed something. I explained that I thought I saw the man who lived here in my yard the night before and wanted to make sure everything was okay. She gave me a weird look and said, "You mean Frank?" I told her I wasn't sure what his name was, but described him. That's when she said, "Frank died last winter. That house has been empty ever since." I asked her what she meant, and she told me Frank had passed away from cancer about 6 months earlier. She even said the place was up for sale, but hadn't had any buyers. I thought maybe she was confused, but I thanked her and left. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept looking out the back window, expecting to see movement. I told myself maybe it was someone else, maybe a squatter or a homeless guy using the woods. But in the back of my mind, I knew what I saw, and I saw him again 2 nights later. It was around 2 a.m. I was in bed when I heard the sound of gravel again, like someone walking beside the house. I sat up. The sound moved from the side yard to the back. Then the porch light turned on. It's a motion light, and nothing else should have triggered it. I moved slowly to the kitchen and peeked out the blinds. Standing on the patio, right in the middle of the light, was the same man. Same green windbreaker. Same posture, only this time he was staring at the house. His face was pale, almost gray. His eyes didn't blink, just locked on the glass like he could see through it. Then he turned and walked toward the woods again, vanishing into the tree line like before. The next morning, I called the non-emergency police line and filed a report. I didn't mention the neighbor being dead, just said I had someone trespassing in my backyard at night. They sent a patrol car by and looked around, but didn't find anything. A few days later, I installed security cameras, one on the back porch, one on the side yard. For a while, nothing happened. Then, 2 weeks later, I got an alert on my phone around 1:47 a.m. motion detected on the back camera. I opened the app, and there he was, standing just beyond the porch light, right at the edge of the camera's infrared. Just standing there. No movement. No sound. Just watching. The footage only lasted 6 seconds before the feed cut out. When it resumed, he was gone. I moved out of that house a few months later. I never saw him again in person, but I still have that 6-second clip saved, and every once in a while, I open it just to remind myself what I saw. Because sometimes, what you see isn't just in your head. Sometimes, it's standing in your backyard. This happened to me a couple years ago when I was still living with my parents. We live in a fairly quiet neighborhood just outside a mid-sized town. Not super rural, but not city life either. It's one of those places where you mostly know your neighbors, and weird stuff doesn't happen often. It was a Thursday night in early fall. I remember because I had a late college class and didn't get home until around 9:30 p.m. By the time I got in, my parents had already gone to bed, and the house was dark except for the kitchen light they usually left on for me. I made myself a quick sandwich and sat at the kitchen table scrolling on my phone for a bit. Our kitchen has a large sliding glass door that leads out to the backyard. That night, the vertical blinds were half open, and through the glass I could see the faint outline of our patio and the trees beyond it. It was pitch black out there, with only a sliver of moonlight cutting through the trees. I don't know why, but I had this weird feeling. Not like something was wrong, just like I wasn't totally alone. I brushed it off as being tired and decided to head to my room. As I passed by the sliding door, I glanced outside. At first I didn't see anything, but then I realized that one of the patio chairs was turned around, facing the door. I was almost sure it had been facing the table earlier. We had this set of 4 metal chairs and a round table that we barely used except in the summer. I paused, looking closer, and then convinced myself maybe my dad had moved it and I just didn't notice before. I went upstairs, got ready for bed, and turned in around 10:30. Now this is where things get weird. At around 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to this soft tapping noise. It wasn't super loud, but loud enough to wake me up. I sat up, trying to place where it was coming from. After a few seconds, I realized it was coming from downstairs. More specifically, it sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. I sat there, frozen for a minute, just listening. Tap, 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 pause, then another tap. I figured maybe one of our cats had knocked something over or was messing with something. I slowly got out of bed and opened my door. The hallway was completely dark. I didn't turn on any lights. I tiptoed downstairs and stood at the bottom for a moment. The tapping had stopped. Everything was dead silent. I stepped into the kitchen and immediately felt it. This sudden chill. The room wasn't cold, but something felt off, like the air was heavier. Then I saw it. There was a smudge on the glass door, like a handprint, but not a full one. Just the tips of fingers, right at the center of the sliding door, as if someone had lightly tapped their fingers against the glass. The patio light was off, so I couldn't see outside clearly, but I swear there was movement. Just barely, like someone had ducked out of view. My heart was pounding. I backed away from the door and grabbed a kitchen knife from the drawer. I wanted to believe it was a prank, or maybe even an animal, but those finger marks were way too high for a raccoon or something like that. And way too precise. I stood there for a few minutes, just listening. Nothing happened. Eventually, I locked the door, though it was already locked, and closed the blinds all the way. Then I went back upstairs, still clutching the knife. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I told my dad what happened. He went outside to check around the yard. One of the patio chairs, the same one that had been turned around, was now on its side about 10 feet from the table. We also found muddy footprints on the grass, leading around the side of the house. They stopped at the gate, which was still locked, but the prints looked fresh. We called the non-emergency police line and filed a report. An officer came out, took a look, But there wasn't much they could do. No real evidence, no damage, just some prints and a weird story. Nothing else happened for the next few nights. Then about a week later, I was up late again, this time just watching TV in the living room. It was around 11 p.m. The kitchen light was off and the blinds were closed, but I had this urge to check the sliding door again. I got up and pulled the blinds open slightly. There was nothing there, but the chair was turned again, facing the door. I didn't sleep much that night either. This happened to my friend Adam while we were in our second year of college. He lived off campus in a 3-bedroom rental with 2 other guys. The house was nothing fancy, one of those older, slightly rundown places a few blocks from the school. His roommates were pretty normal. One of them was hardly ever around, and the other, Jordan, was a bit weird but kept to himself. Kind of the quiet guy who spent most of his time gaming in his room. Adam got the smallest bedroom, which was right near the hallway bathroom and across from a small linen closet. He didn't mind it though. Rent was cheap, and the place was close enough to walk to class. Everything was fine for the first month or two. Then weird stuff started happening. The first thing he noticed was the attic light. There was a small square ceiling hatch in the hallway right outside his room. It had a pull string and a wooden ladder that dropped down when opened. They almost never used it. The landlord had told them the attic was just insulation and old wiring, not really usable space. But sometimes, when Adam walked past at night, he swore he could see the faintest bit of light coming from the edges of the panel, just barely glowing. At first, he thought maybe one of the guys had gone up there for some reason and left a flashlight on, but when he asked, both of them denied ever touching it. Jordan said he wouldn't even go up there if someone paid him. Still, Adam didn't think too much about it until the noises started. It was always around 2 or 3 a.m. He'd be in bed scrolling on his phone or trying to sleep when he'd hear faint shifting sounds above him. Not like mice or small animals, more like movement, human movement, soft thuds, shuffling. Occasionally, something that sounded like a low breath or exhale, as if someone was lying on the boards directly above his ceiling. He told the others, and of course they brushed it off, said it was the house settling or squirrels. But Adam knew what that sounded like. This was different. It sounded deliberate. One night, he got so fed up he grabbed a flashlight and decided to check the attic himself. He pulled down the ladder and climbed up slowly. The attic smelled musty, and it was freezing. The insulation was patchy, and there were boards laid out between the beams, but no real flooring. Just a few old boxes and some wiring. He panned the flashlight around. Nothing. No sign of anyone. No blankets, food, or any indication that someone had been up there. But as he turned to climb back down, he noticed something strange. The air vent in the far corner had dust patterns around it, like someone had touched or pushed it, and the metal cover looked slightly bent. It led into the ventilation system that connected the bedrooms and the living room. He made a mental note to check it later, then climbed back down and went to bed. The next few nights were quiet. No footsteps, no light, no breathing. Then, on a Saturday night, Adam had a couple friends over. They stayed late playing Xbox in the living room. Around 2 a.m., one of them, Kyle, paused the game and said, "Hey, do you hear that?" They all stopped. There was a faint metallic rattling coming from one of the wall vents, the one just above the couch. Then, clear as day, they heard something scrape inside, like fingernails, or maybe a ring brushing against the metal. They just stared at it for a second. Adam got up, stood on the couch, and tried to look inside with his phone flashlight. But he couldn't see much. Just darkness and the thin metal flaps. They brushed it off as maybe something caught in the system, but none of them were really convinced. The next day, Adam called the landlord. He told him he thought maybe an animal got into the ductwork or attic, and that the vents should be checked. The landlord said he'd send someone that week, but no one ever showed up. That same night, Adam stayed up late working on a paper. Around 3 a.m., he stepped out into the hallway to use the bathroom. As he walked past the attic panel, he stopped. The pull string was moving. Just slightly. No breeze, no air vents were on. It swung like someone had just let go of it. He didn't even go to the bathroom. He went back to his room, locked the door, and didn't sleep. 2 days later, things hit a new level. Adam was in bed, half asleep when he heard it. A whisper, not like a voice in the room. It was coming from the wall vent near his headboard. Faint, crackling, like someone whispering just below the volume of comprehension. He sat up and listened. It stopped. Then, a quiet tapping, like a fingernail on the metal. He jumped out of bed, yanked the vent cover off the wall, and shined his flashlight in. All he could see was the duct extending into the dark, but there were smudges on the inside, like fingerprints. That morning, he told his roommates he was going to stay with his girlfriend for a few days. Before he left, he set up his phone on a charger, pointing at the vent, and hit record. When he checked the footage the next day, it was mostly just still darkness. But at around 2:42 a.m., there was a faint click, followed by low breathing. Very faint, but real. Then, for just a second, two small reflections appeared, like the light had bounced off a pair of eyes just inside the vent. The breathing stopped, and the recording ended. Adam moved out a week later. The landlord never did anything. A few months later, the house was up for rent again. Same listing, no mention of anything unusual. But Adam still has the recording. And I've heard it. Whatever was in those vents wasn't an animal.
If you enjoyed these chilling tales and want more true horror stories from the shadows, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Hauntica, and tap the bell icon so you never miss what's lurking next. Your support helps keep the darkness alive and the stories coming.